All right, so there's a good number of us, so I think we can get going. Welcome everyone to the first session of PetrolPlaza Talks. During these challenging times of disinformation and a lack of knowledge sharing amongst the industry, at PetrolPlaza we thought it'd be good to adapt to the new times and try to help provide some clarity with the voices of industry leaders and experts, such as the ones that we have here today. So I'd like to welcome Brian Madderson. He's been the chairman of the UK's Petrol Retailers Association for 11 years. He's also the chairman of the Car Wash Association. His association provides help to independent forecourt retailers in the UK, which account for 70% of all stations in the UK. We have Joe Boyle, director of FreshStop in South Africa, which is the largest and fastest growing convenience retail brand in South Africa. They now have over 320 convenience stores at Capitec stations in South Africa. And in 2013, they were named International Retailer of the Year by NACS and Insight. We also have Jörg Heilingbrunner, Managing Director, Scheidt Bachmann. Scheidt Bachmann is a system provider in more than 50 countries under the new product brand Sigma, which uses cloud-based technology. They're helping retailers change from your traditional petrol station to what they call mobility supermarket. So we can get going. Brian, I'd like to start with you. We had a good chat last week where you kind of told me how the cooperation between forecourt retailers, the government, and oil companies had helped stations make it through this crisis. So can you just tell us a little bit more about that and just about the general situation in the UK and what's the latest forecast that you have?
Yes, our section has been fortunate in as much as petrol retail outlets were deemed to be essential businesses from the outset, and the government moved quickly with a financial package which our retailers were able to take advantage of. First of all was a £25,000 cash grant payable immediately by their local authority for any retail outlet with a rateable value up to £51,000 per year. So that covered a lot of the small and medium size, and there was no restriction on the amount of grant that could be had. So it wasn't one per company, it was every property that met the criteria. Secondly, they moved to bring in a business rates holiday for 12 months. It included all the filling stations. So some of the larger groups like Motor Fuel and Euro Garages would have been saving from that millions of pounds, literally millions of pounds, but they would need it. And so this was really an important step. In addition, they were able to defer VAT payments, and that lasted for 3 months. And sorry, the phone's going, I tried to turn it off. And for 3 months, trying to get rid of it. And so that was also a good tax benefit. And then there was a series of different loans backed by the government, up to 80 or even 100%, no interest payable over a period of time. The second thing was I wrote personally to all the retail heads of the oil companies early in March, saying that in order to weather the storm, they would need to be flexible when it came to credit terms and other aspects. And I'm pleased to say that almost without any exemption, those big oil companies, small oil companies, met my requests. So for instance, instead of having a premium for a part load of fuel, they just sent the part load at normal cost. And for large loads, where they controlled the inventory, so vendor managed inventory systems such as Shell had. They were very careful that they didn't overstock and cause a problem. And where there were issues with credit, they allowed extra credit lines. So moving from, say, 7 days to as much as 21 days. So those have all been very helpful. It needed to be, because the fuel demand in the early days of the lockdown dropped over a cliff. Some of our members had drops as much as 85, even 90% of normal volume, particularly smaller sites in the rural areas where they didn't get a lot of traffic. Larger transient near urban sites probably fell to 60 or even 50% below the norm. What really has helped is the speed at which those dealers incentivized the users to come to their sites by providing distancing maps in the shop, by providing perspex screens between the cashier and the consumer, by providing distance maps even by the coffee machine, by encouraging payment by card only, not by cash, ensuring that the self-distancing was happening, and in some cases, controlling the number of people in the shop at any one time. So lots of initiatives taken, gloves area, sanitizers, and some of them went so far as to offer local delivery service of their convenience items to inhabitants nearby who were self-isolating for reasons of age or underlying health conditions. And one wonders, with such a move that was publicized a lot in the local press, whether they will now see benefits when we come out of the lockdown of those people being grateful and thinking, well, I can use this convenience store rather than go to a big supermarket, which is further away, much more uncomfortable for me to go to. So I'm hoping that there will be some follow-on benefits to all of the good work that they did. And actually, a lot of them today, maybe 70% of the dealers, the independents, have some kind of recognized symbol brand convenience store, whether it be Spar, Nisa, Cost Cutter, Budgeons, or even some of the supermarkets like Gerald Ronson's group, Rontec, has now got, I think, about 50 Morrison's Daily, which have been outperforming even their other convenience stores because of that brand name. And likewise, BP with their M&S stores have been doing terrific business through M&S. So one hopes that there will be some benefit in terms of residual goodwill towards the dealers who've certainly gone out of their way to help their local communities.
Yeah, that's very true, Brian. And that's something that we'll touch upon a little bit later about the role of petrol stations during this crisis. Yeah, thanks a lot for that overview. So, Joe, could you just tell us how you face this crisis as FreshStop? What kind of initiatives you put in place, and how have you acted in this context right now?
Good afternoon, Oscar, Brian, and Jörg, and to our listeners. I'll put a bit of an overview together so that you can understand the national context and where we are with FreshStop, and understanding that FreshStop is a convenience C-store brand to a fuel brand, both run separately, but we run the C-store brand by itself, and we're part of a bigger organization called Food Lovers Market, who have about 130 supermarkets within South Africa as well. So we've got a good understanding of what their business has been doing and what our business has been doing. So basically the lockdown in South Africa is a little bit behind Europe and the States. We started our lockdown at the end of March, 27th of March. And it's just some of the general public restrictions that we had were no sale of alcohol. So there's been no sale of alcohol in South Africa since the end of March. No sale of cigarettes in South Africa, which is the end of March. Alcohol really didn't affect FreshStop, as we don't sell it through our stores anyway. But the cigarettes are plus minus 20% participation of our sales in the C stores. Our coffee brands were stopped. The barista coffee specifically, that hurt us. That's about 10%. We're normally about 15% sales, but the push button machines were allowed, but the baristas not. Our hot food offers in the stores, and if you're aware of FreshStop, we're very strong in our hot food offers. We've got our own in-house brands, crispy chicken, grill to go, fish and chips, hot dog cafe, those type of brands. That's normally about 20% participation of our sales. So there alone, you're looking at 50% of our sales already handcuffed, where we can't really do anything. Now, the general public in itself, were not allowed to leave their homes unless you were going out to purchase food, and only essential journeys. That means no dog walking, no exercising. So they were basically restricted. When we came to level 4, it actually got a little bit worse for the general public. Well, maybe a bit of a mix. They brought in a curfew. You were not allowed out of your homes until after 8 o'clock in the evening until 5 a.m. in the morning. We did, however, relax a little bit on exercise. So you're allowed to exercise at 6 a.m. in the morning until 9 a.m. They brought in all general public, anyone who enters the general public must wear masks. So that was a big one for South Africa. So the big thing that we seen our government doing was they then brought in with level 4. So we started at level 5, moved to level 4. When they brought in level 4, they opened up the business to about 30%. So that's mainly the big business. So what you've seen was basically a hold on recreational, but bringing government back in slowly with the 30% use. So we've seen quite a nice move in that, specifically on the fuel and in the FreshStops. Now, when we talk about, and we've heard lots of conversation around the curves, is it going to be a U curve, a V curve? And some people even talked about a hockey stick. During our 7 weeks, we've seen our business drop in FreshStop to the worst case scenario to date at 37%. Last week, which was just finished our 7th week, we're now in our 8th week, we're back up to 3%. Keeping in mind, we're still not allowed to sell cigarettes. Our hot food offer has been closed. However, we are allowed to do home deliveries. So we've been able to change our hot food to home deliveries. And also what we did is we changed it from serving deep fried chicken or grilled chicken across a counter to letting it cool and putting it into packs so customers could pick it up as they came in through the stores. And I must say, if I look back at our government, and I think it's a feeling of the general public, if you look at our stats since the lockdown, we've got just over 15,500 cases. We've got 7,000 recoveries. And unfortunately, we've got a death number of 264, which if I look at some of the stats around the world, is not bad. So we're taking in that balance of the damage to business and the damage to human life. So I think we're doing pretty good there. And the government subsidy situation, definitely our government has come to the party, and some substantial payments towards businesses who are not allowed people to work. And those are already coming through, and the values are fairly substantial, making sure that the businesses are able to pay their staff, specifically the ones who are at home and not able to work, and then subsidize the ones who are at home and only allowed to work at certain times. In our own drive at FreshStop, we reduced our royalty from day one, our royalty income by 30%. And again, our drive is to ensure the longevity of our retailers. And we feel that doing that will certainly help the guys over this period. We've also put together a FreshStop COVID-19 team. For the first 21 days, we had meetings every day for maybe an hour up to 2 hours. And that included retailers, property owners, wholesalers, industry forums. We had legal advice. And then we used that forum to be able to lobby government to help them understand some of the obstacles we had as essential services to make sure we were able to get our services out there, specifically to the first responders. We communicated to our retailers. We sent 55 comms out to our retailers over the period of 53 days, helping them understand on how to react, for instance, of a policeman came into the store and said, you're not allowed to sell hot food, or you're not allowed to do X. We would then show them the government gazette. We'd explain to them how this would happen, because there was a little bit of inconsistency throughout the country, how the police understood the government restrictions. And we thought, let's educate our retailers to ensure that they're able to educate the police and show them. Obviously, if the policeman said, I'm telling you to stop or I'm going to arrest you, we tell the retailers, do what the policeman said, don't argue. So I think that worked pretty good with us. From our job at head office, I've seen quite a change. We actually became very involved in procurement, specifically in sanitizers, retail and industrial, masks, temperature gauges. Brian, you talked about a few elements there as well with regards to sneeze guards. And we had our projects teams manufacture sneeze guards. We had our projects team, along with the marketing team, develop floor markers that were stuck to the ground to ensure that we kept customers social distancing. We also did a little calculation for each store from our projects team to say, if your store is X amount size, including your staff, you will only be allowed to have X amount of customers in your store at one time. And obviously that came in quite handy when we brought back the coffee at level 4. The barista coffee, and we know how some people are addicted to their coffee. We had queues in the morning of people coming back in to purchase their coffee, especially now during the exercise time in the morning from 6 a.m. till 9. So we had to manage those queues and make sure we kept the social distancing. From our operations side, again, as a franchisor, how do you manage business consultants going into these 300 sites to advise the retailers? So we had to look at certain ways of doing virtual visits, of discussing with the retailer specifically on these type of formats, making sure that those retailers were COVID-19 compliant. And those are some of the elements we brought in, which was, again, sanitizer at the front door, every customer. The cashiers had to have sanitizer. We had sanitizing spots inside the stores. We had information posters developed by our marketing, made sure that they were up explaining to customers and specifically to our staff. We had the sneeze guards developed inside the store, making sure that we're able to protect customers and our staff as well. Then on the legal aspects, we had our COVID-19 put together risk analysis for every one of our stores. We had incident registers, and we appointed officers inside the stores to ensure that all those compliant things were there and that we could manage it from an outside. From a human resource side, we had our HR directors in, and understanding that if we had an incident in a store, and I'm sure you'll understand that the panic and fear that could run through a store. So explaining to the staff that not everyone is going to die, and some of the stats, because they were concerned that once we get it, are we going to die right away? And then you start explaining to some of the details. And when someone talks them through that, it helped quite a bit. On the marketing perspective, the social media, again, if we had an incident in the store, how do we manage that? How do we respond to it? Because that became very important, especially when customers were saying, I was in your store, which person in your store was tested positive, if there is one. We've now got plans in place to say it was either someone in the back or it was a cashier, obviously keeping confidential the cashier's name, but making sure that customer was feeling confident that would he have been in the store that day and would he need to do anything about it. So those became fairly strong elements. On the Q&As, that also became fairly strong, making sure that our retailers had an area where they could ask specific questions, especially if something happened. So when we moved back to level 4 and we were allowed to do the home deliveries and the coffee coming through, we've seen huge jumps in specific areas with customers coming back in. And I say the numbers coming back in as well. And again, with the fuel volumes jumping up, we also seen more customers coming into the store. But some of the areas that we've seen were quite unique in the store that we've seen jumping substantially. And those were areas like fruit and veg. We've seen those jump substantially. Our fruit and veg offer, unfortunately, in our business, we're part of the fruit and veg group. So our procurement and our distribution of fruit and veg is quite substantial. So that became a fairly healthy opportunity for customers, especially now in South Africa, we're moving into winter. So we're now saying, guys, we've got access to oranges and strawberries, which is high vitamin C content, and will help you build up your immune system for any colds and flus that's coming, specifically COVID-19. Then again, on the groceries, we always really struggled to compete with the big quick serve restaurants to get a Mr. Delivery or delivery service going. In our restrictions, they weren't allowed to open. In fact, they're still not allowed to open. So with us doing the hot foods, we were able to utilize and use this window of opportunity to ensure we got on board with those delivery services. And that's Mr. Delivery, Uber, and you might have heard of a company called Bolt. And some of our stores also are bringing in their own delivery services. They well, let's manage it yourself. We've got a few platforms now working with that. But the nice thing is we've seen huge jumps in our groceries and fruit and veg, specifically for people who can't get to the stores. And there again, other people are using it that don't want to come to the stores. So our probably, and Jörg, you'll probably be able to assist here. Our biggest obstacle now is how do we get all these together and how do these technologies and make sure that we can have customers coming through our store without handling cash, or people really at the minute don't really want to handle cash. They don't want to touch, they want to hover. The credit cards want to hover over the machines. They don't want to put numbers into the machines. The ordering online, the click and collect, those are areas that we've not got it. We're saying we need to get into these and we need to get into them quickly so we make sure we've got a continued longevity and a continuation of these products. So I hope that gives you a bit of an overview, Oscar, of where we are in South Africa.
Yeah, that was great, Joe. And I can sympathize with South Africa because we've had a similar lockdown in Spain, although unfortunately our numbers have been a lot higher. So perhaps, Jörg, when going to you, as Joe just mentioned, that there's a lot of customer behavior changing right now, and a lot of people want to get away from the physical contact. So if just first, because obviously you're a leader in the DACH market, so maybe you can give us a little bit of an overview of what you've heard from your clients, from the retailers about the situation in Germany, or maybe Austria and Switzerland, just a very brief overview, and then maybe go into how that's feeding into your own business with these changes in customer behavior.
Yes, of course, Oscar. So thank you very much. It was already very interesting for me to get these insights from the UK and from South Africa, and I'm really glad that we didn't have that strong lockdown in Germany. So maybe give you a quick overview of what the situation is like. We were also affected like all the other countries in the world with the COVID disease. Luckily, our figures were never really that high. So we have only 8,000 people dying in the last 2 months. That's comparatively low compared to the 80 million population of Germany. And I think it was because we started really early with testing. And of course, we did see how it happened in Italy. So there was some let's say, some learnings from that, some unfortunate learnings. And then our health system worked quite well. So we never had really problems in the hospitals. There were some areas which were very much affected. And basically, where the hotspots were, it was skiing. I have to say that in Austria primarily. And we had the carnival. So these were the areas where it actually spread very fast, but they really identified these hotspots very early. So they isolated them. And I think that's why let's say the numbers, of course, they increased, but not to that extent than to other countries. And therefore the government also chose severe lockdown measurements. Of course, you had to stay home, but you could go out. You could go for a dog walk. You could go to office. Of course, the companies were asked to put their employees in home offices, but there were people still on the street. There were people still driving their cars. And especially in April, of course, the volume dropped down on average 50%. That was dramatic. But on the other hand, I think we will come to that later on. I think what Joe already mentioned and Brian, that the dry stock, that was quite a stable situation because the retailers were quite crowded. The restriction was there. And as you said, Joe, the retailers took it very serious in the very early stage. So they gave confidence to the customers. So the people still came to the petrol stations, not only for fueling, but also for getting dry stock. And that I think that really helped. And it's regionally differences. So there are some areas very highly affected and some areas which even profited from that situation. So overall, the situation in Germany in terms of health wasn't that bad. Economically, it's a disaster. So we also had these that support from the government. I think the government spent billions of dollars. So I don't know who is going to pay that back, but that's on the other side of the coin. And as you know, we have been a tool being applied in the financial crisis, like in the 2008, 2009. So companies can apply for short-term work allowance. So the people stay in the company, but they are laid off, and they get up to 85% of their net salary. But in these last weeks, about 750,000 companies applied for this short-term work allowance, and that accounts for 10 million employees in Germany. So we have about 44 million being employed. So every fourth person has been laid off. So it's dramatic. So we don't have seen a rise in unemployment yet, since we have this let's say this mean to lower that down. But of course, if the business is not picking up, people will turn to unemployment. So what did we do in this situation? Since we are, as Oscar, as you said, we are a system supplier, and the fuel retail sites are critical infrastructure. Of course, we have contracts, and we were obliged to fulfill our contract. It's not only service and maintenance, but it's also delivering new features, new functions, as you said, Joe, because people are desperately asking for contactless payment. So we set up a task force already in March, and of course we were looking at our people to protect them. It was fairly easy in the office. So we had two groups. We made everybody home office capable, and they were coming 1 week, and the other week the other teams came. But in production it was different, and of course the field service technicians, the guys who go to sites, they need to be protected in terms of hygiene sets and mask and whatsoever. On the other hand, we had, of course, to keep our supply chain, because as you know, if you're producing products and there's a tiny part missing, then the product can't be finished. So that was a challenge for our procurement department, for our logistics, but that's still, I think, quite good working. On the other hand, as you know, we had to keep our business continuity and, of course, to meet the expectations from our customers. And in the early beginning, I expected that our customers will just stop everything. And if you look at our major customers, the oil companies, they have been really hit not only by the COVID, let's say, decline, but also by the oil price decline. So they have, let's say, two frontiers. But what we do see, of course, they're reviewing their projects, but they are still investing in strategic projects. They're still investing in projects such as mobile payment, contactless payment, remote access. And I think that's what you all mentioned before, that's what customers expect, because they want to go to the shop and they don't want to pay cash. They want to use their credit card, contactless. And they lifted, let's say, the limit to 50 euros. So you have to only insert the PIN above 50 euros. So that really helps to create confidence for the customers. And what we do see is furthermore self-checkout solutions. So what we see is that this COVID, let's say, crisis really hardly affected us, but it's accelerating, let's say, the transformation in digitization. And in Germany, people were quite resistant, differently to the UK, where they have a much higher appeal to mobile payment, to new solutions. So the Germans are quite old-fashioned, but in these days, contactless payment, it rose by more than 50% or even more. People use mobile payment and people asking for self-checkout and other solutions. So I think that's, let's say, if you can say that, the positive side of the coin of this situation, that really people rethink their strategies and accelerate the transformation. So that's what helped us. And we were able and capable still of, let's say, being almost 100% operational. So we had no issues, no incidents within our European organization so far. And touch wood, I hope it stays like this, and we can really help our customers to satisfy the needs of their customers, to really keep or to get the business at least back to where we have been prior to the crisis.
Thank you, Jörg. So I just want to let know that for people watching, they can write down the questions in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to a few of them by the end of the conversation. So there's one thing I'd like to ask you, and I'd also ask you to be brief in your answer. Is that speaking to a few professionals from the industry, one being Puma Energy in Africa, is this whole concept that gas stations have kind of, the public perception of petrol stations has changed due to the COVID-19, and they've kind of become a safe haven in some areas, especially in remote areas. So I just wanted to get your view, and you can all jump into this, about this change in public perception and this kind of new role that sites now have. We can start with you if you want, Brian.
Yes, that's certainly true, particularly in some of the rural areas where there are essential workers, midwives, doctors, nurses, other frontline care workers, who have been really complimentary about the fact that their local petrol station remained open throughout, often being staffed by the proprietor and his wife or husband, partner, whatever it might be, because some of their staff had gone into self-isolation or had to go home to help others, but they kept working very long hours, and they also provided this top-up shopping for sandwiches, coffee, tea, milk, all those eggs, all those sort of essential items. So I think you are right that the public perception has really improved. And I think it has improved over, let's say, even the supermarkets, which have played their role, but didn't really cater for the rural and more disadvantaged parts of the economy where our members are largely present. So yes, that has been a good thing.
Oscar, I assume you're asking me. You're on mute.
Sorry, Joe. Yeah, it was just to see if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think that's a great overview, Brian. There's a few areas I'll add on rather than just repeat. Definitely on what we would call a neighborhood site. Customers now not wanting to go into these big shopping centers and malls. They're coming in on a much more regular basis and being able to buy a lot of the foods that they would have had to go to malls before. And we've definitely seen an expansion on our range on specifically in grocery areas. We've seen a huge increase on first responders, police, ambulance, fire brigade, and one can imagine those guys working the longer hours. And their desire seemed to be more on what we would call a health food offer, and also on a comfort food, which would be a hot food like a deep fried chicken or a grilled chicken. And it was a little bit disappointing for them. They come into some of our stores and not be told that, sorry, that we were told to close it. When the second wave came and we were able to go into producing hot foods and do the home deliveries, you be creative and you start bringing around what you call curbside deliveries. The guys would come close by, deliver to them there, so they're actually not coming into the store. So that created another way around it. Each store, and Brian touched on it earlier, the creativity that came up from some of the retailers. Some of them would start WhatsApp groups, and they would say, well, WhatsApp me your order. I'll WhatsApp you back whenever it's ready, and you come and pick it up. And those are another scenarios where those groups now, they've got strong links now with big numbers to their communities, and you can start using those databases to add on to that. In the rural areas, there was no question with some of the bigger sites, rather than traveling and obviously people not working, people would come closer to the rural areas. And we've seen big jumps in areas like fruit and vegetables, the basic stuffs. So yeah, definitely a change in trends. Where customers at office-bound areas, the big CBDs have dropped substantially. And those areas now we're starting to see picking up with the banks and the big businesses coming in. But again, I'm asking the question, will all those canteen areas open again that's in there? They're definitely not open at the moment, so we can see the move towards our stores. And again, asking for a healthier, wholesome, comfort food scenario that we've got to get. And we've got a bit of a mix in our stores. We've got 150, what we call those food offers inside the 300 stores. And we now see a need for those in the majority of our sites, again, depending where they are. So we're definitely going to see a shift towards that.
Yeah. Just one sec. We have a specific question for you, Joe. Somebody's asking, why are cigarettes not allowed to be sold in South Africa?
It was. I'm not an expert on it, but what we gathered up was it was an area of socializing, where a lot of the guys would stand together. Remember, maybe our country's a little bit different with smoking. Not allowed to smoke inside a building, so they would create an area outside where 10 or 15 people would go outside and stand together smoking. So they would say, let's stop that, let's break that off and do away with that. Also, they were saying that smokers are one of the more people at risk, and that's something I've heard, so I don't know if that's true or not. And they wanted to cut back on that. So that was the two main areas I had, Oscar, okay, that I've picked up.
Yeah. So if we start looking towards the future, and we think of what the future is going to look like after the COVID-19, and what changes will this accelerate? What are the changes do you see happening? Jörg, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Thank you, Oscar. For sure, it will definitely change customer expectations, customer habits. As we said, so the customer journey is different. And what we do see, and what we get from the feedback from our customers, is that we have to live with that COVID. So it's not over like in September, or let's say the end of the year. So what we expect is that still stay on for the next couple of years, and whether it's not COVID-19, then it's COVID-20 or COVID-21. So I think that's why our customers change their business models, and they ask us to provide solutions. And I think the contactless payment and mobile payment is just the start of. And it will really affect, let's say, how the fuel retail side is working. And what I see, I think that was Joe was saying, that people, because they stay home, they purchase locally. So they don't go downtown. Well, they're not traveling. Yeah. So usually in May, many people are on vacation, or in April. So they stay home, and they really change their habits, and it will lead into online ordering and home delivery, and I think that's what's the situation will change. So there are many ideas. We're having workshops with customers of how to get prepared post-COVID, of how can we provide the appropriate solutions, and there are many things coming up. So I think it's hard to say, well, this is the right strategy or that will be the solution, but it will definitely be an accelerator. And I think that's also a chance for businesses to really just pick up and come with great new business models.
Mm-hmm. Any more key changes that you see happening? Well, just to mention one that I see, is that it seems like those retailers that have made an effort to communicate well what they were doing during this crisis, that's kind of been a big success amongst their customers. They've kind of really appreciated not only what they were doing, but kind of like a good communication to the consumer in that sense. So, Brian, do you see any changes occurring due to this? Somebody's asking if you see retailers focusing more on the dry stock than on the fuels, if it's going to be harder.
Yes, I would say that they will be looking at the possibility of expanding their shop, maybe changing brands if they have not been too happy with the brand that they've been supplying them. And so there will be some smaller changes there. I think we're all just wondering whether this has actually set back the move towards electric vehicles, which, albeit was very small still, whether it set it back yet further for two reasons. One is that the price of petrol is the lowest it's been for nearly 5 years in the UK. So people are getting used to that, and it's below £1 a litre at some of the supermarkets. And secondly, if so many people have been furloughed and only getting 80% of their normal wage or capped at 2,500, and they have been made redundant, there's going to be some empty consumer pockets. And I guess people will naturally hang on to existing vehicles for longer than they may otherwise have done, even though there is still the lease option available, but that is an expensive option if you just don't have the money. So we think that if the economy is taking a real hit, as some people suggest, then the whole EV movement could be delayed by at least 2 years, maybe even 3 years.
Yeah, that's very interesting stuff, Brian, and it will be seen if the low oil prices and the lack of funds by big companies will have an effect on slowing down that kind of investment in alternative fuels.
There is no doubt that the green lobby will be jumping on the air pollution stats, and London, for instance, was as clean as a glen in Scotland for a short while, and all the green lobby will be saying how wonderful this is, and it saved 5,000 children's asthmatic attacks and whatever. But that's great, and I'm not even disputing that. But if the consumer just does not have the money, they're not going to be able to spend 20, 30, 40,000 euros, whatever it is, on the latest Tesla, the latest Volkswagen electric car. They'll be keeping their beloved old petrol or diesel car where the fuel costs are way, way down for a lot longer. I mean, that surely is the natural expectation. They're talking, some of the big manufacturers, the OEMs of cars, are talking to the government about a scrappage scheme. Frankly, I think the government has got far more worries about the overall cost of handling COVID than they have about bringing in a scrappage scheme. So I don't see that coming at all. Thus, we believe that this is going to severely push back the EV evolution.
Yeah.
Maybe Oscar, I just want to come back to your remark in terms of communication. I think that's key within, let's say, within all governments, within all companies. So doing town hall meetings live, and I think that also links to that the companies they come up with loyalty schemes, not only because of just selling their products, but also of keeping their customers informed. So it's not a one-way road, so it's a two-way road. And I think that will also come. And then I did see Hans-Jürgen, hello, you're welcome, did see a question referring to me about pay at the pump. I'm sure that pay at the pump, the mobile payment will be growing, because people who don't want to go into the shop, but of course they need to fuel up their car, they will use that. So there's I think, like the same with contactless payment. It took months or years to really make that acceptable within the population. And now you even go to a bakery and you pay 1.50, you pay with your credit card contactless. So it's really helping. And I think, Brian, what you said in terms of the energy transformation, yes, you're right. The oil price is low, and it's hard for somebody to let's say buy a new car because it's electrically fueled. But I think that sustainability and that's transformation, what the car manufacturing industry is doing, will be on track. And I think maybe it's slightly postponed, but I can tell you from our customers, from the big oil companies, they're still working on that, and they're, I think, working very, very intensively on that. So it's, of course, it's to the public, it's not the number one topic, but I do see that they're working on EV chargers, they're working on hydrogen networks, and on other ideas. So I think it will of course be a bit slower, but it will definitely come.
Yeah, well, as you say, Jörg, there's still, you know, we see in Germany there's still openings of hydrogen stations. Shell announced this plan to be, you know, a very ambitious plan for their emissions by 2050. Joe, somebody was asking if you've noticed and do you expect a higher number of downloads for your FreshStop app, and you know, perhaps along those lines, any other expectations you have for your business in this post-COVID time?
Yeah, I definitely see loyalty programs becoming much more important, and key loyalty programs where the customers are getting a better value, and specifically for guys who are working from home as well. But then the onus will also be on us retailers to ensure that we firstly make sure our customers feel safe and secure coming in. And a few of the points that I see changing in the very near future is the size of our stores and the layouts of our stores. We've now got to look at the backup areas to say how much stock can we carry. If we're looking at online ordering, click and collect, we're going to need more space. We'll also be looking at areas like drive-throughs, where we never really had those in convenience stores before, where we have the customers coming through. I do see an opportunity in the fuel as well. I don't think international flights anyway, will come back very quickly. I see a lot more people driving, so we need to prepare our highway sites to make sure that they're ready for a little bit of a jump. People traveling on vacation, I don't see many people going overseas. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good point about aviation, Joe.
Yes, we would also agree with that. We think that already we're hearing that campsites, caravans are being booked up, local hotels by the seaside are being booked up because families need a holiday and they just won't be able to travel, at least for the next 6 months, as they have done or already booked. So more staycations. So if the market comes back and the economy comes back, we might actually see a little increase in fuel volumes because of the recreational needs.
Yeah. Okay, Joe, don't worry. We'll take it from here. One of the key points that people have pointed to as well is the sanitation of stations, the actual hygiene of the sites. That's going to be one of the key things that people are going to look at now when they come to the forecourt. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
On the sanitation, definitely. We're looking at how we do it and how we communicate to our customers. Sorry, you're going to have to excuse me, Oscar. I've got something in my throat. So.
Don't worry, Joe. You did a good job. We've only got 4 minutes left, so you made it through the
Well,
the
I
whole
would
thing.
agree with that too. Just one point we've noticed in the UK, which is a negative. There's been a 40% increase in drive-offs at the forecourt, and more is occasioned by people wearing masks. So it almost seems as though wearing masks going into a fuel station is becoming more normal, and that gives them the confidence to drive off and not pay. So it's something we're talking to the police.
Okay. All right. Yeah, maybe one more thing, Oscar, is in terms of well, sanitation, of course, is key, and I think every site has to have some of this, let's say, devices. But what we are doing currently is to increase the confidence, is to provide solutions in terms of controlling the access to the site, because I don't know whether it was what's the situation in other countries, but usually you have only got access according to the square meters or the square feet of a shop. And this needs now it's monitored more on a, let's say, on a on a basis, on a responsibility by the customers themselves. But we are working on solutions, whether it's app-based or whatsoever, in order, let's say, to build confidence in the petrol sites. Because I think at the end of the day, people tend to go to the shops where they feel most protected. And that could be because the people wear masks, or the requirements are well kept. But I think at the end of the day, that's one aspect which has never been considered. It was always convenience, it was friendliness, it was accessibility. But I think now security will become very important as one of the criteria for whether I choose a fuel retail site or whether I go to a grocery store.
Funny enough, in South Africa, Oscar, the security, the incidents of crime have become a lot less with the curfews and the police in the areas. Where we do see key elements is ensuring the safety of our staff. Because if anything's going to be passed one person to another, it'll be through the staff members. So making sure, for instance, we're 24-hour service, so we've got different shifts. You may have had a change area. You now can't have one change area. And then the sanitization in between those shifts, how does that manage? Making sure that your staff are educated, built up, and making sure that they're able to talk around this. These issues to customers when they ask also gives that confidence. So it's education, and making sure that they've got the backup and they're confident in their areas that they're not going to pick up something in the stores from other staff members, and that moves on towards the customers. But yeah, definitely we those are big concerns with us, with changing areas, dining areas, with small stores, maybe 40, 50 people, and sometimes less working on a store, but 3 shifts. So managing those, you've got to make sure you handle it correctly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's it for today, guys. So we've seen that it's a very challenging time, but it's also a time where new ideas can come in and changes can accelerate. We definitely expect some changes from the technology side, as Jörg's mentioned. Retailers such as Joe will have to adapt their sites to ensure the success of their business. And few retailers around the world will be expecting to see what happens, in the government and the evolution of COVID-19, which hopefully we won't get any setbacks. I want to thank you all for participating. Jörg, Brian, Joe, you've all been brilliant. Thank you very much for this first session of PetrolPlaza Talks. We'll be doing more episodes in the near future, and hopefully we'll see all of you back there.
Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Jörgen, and thank you to our listeners.
Thank you very much, everyone.